are fearfully and wonderfully made human. Thank you for being here today. Grief. Grief is unpredictable. One moment, life feels stable, and the next, everything shifts. I have been walking through one of the most challenging seasons of my life after losing my mother on February 6th of this year. She spent 9 days in the hospital before coming home under my care. After 6 days, she chose hospice, and just 2 days later, she was gone. The speed of it all left me wrestling with both the profound sorrow of losing her and the overwhelming exhaustion of caregiving. Just before she entered hospice, I poured my heart into a blog post called Ever Been Sideswept by Life, Faith, Resilience, and Hope in the Storms of Caregiving and Grief. Writing has been one of my greatest tools for healing. Today, I want to share not only my story, but also insights, encouragement, and some actionable strategies for navigating grief, trauma, and transformation. Because here's the truth. We are all going to die. That may sound harsh, but it's actually an invitation to live intentionally, nurture our mental health, embrace resilience, and create a legacy of healing and faith. Grief is not just about loss. It's about what we choose to do with the life we still have. My mom's passing isn't the first loss I've ever endured. My father died of cancer 22 years ago. My aunt, who was like a mom to me, died of Alzheimer's in October of 2020. My half-sister passed just 17 months ago from cancer. My childhood best friend, her name was Monica, died of leukemia when I was 9. And I haven't even mentioned all those who have passed in between now and then. Death has been a part of my story from a young age, shaping me in ways I am still processing. But grief is layered. My mom and I had a complicated relationship, not the kind where mother and daughter were best friends, which is what I always wanted. Instead, I've had to navigate not only the grief of losing her, but also the grief of my childhood, shaped by complex trauma and emotional wounds. For years, I have worked through what it means to heal from intergenerational trauma, to grow beyond pain, and to choose to break cycles rather than stay stuck in old wounds. As someone who has struggled with health anxiety, losing multiple people to cancer and other ailments has only heightened my awareness of how fragile life is. And this is why I want to use this episode to not just talk about my personal grief, but also about how we care for ourselves while we're still here, physically, emotionally, and spiritually. Throughout my career as a therapist, I have worked with countless individuals processing loss, grieving parents, grieving their spouses, siblings, friends, and their childhoods. Walking alongside so many people in their grief has given me a deep understanding of how unique and unpredictable the journey is. But even with all of my experience, nothing fully prepares you for your own grief. 2 days after my mother passed, my friends and family pulled together the most incredible memorial service. About 70 people came to support my son and me, even though I was in a grief fog, which honestly I'm sort of still am. I was able to speak, and my son sang his abuela's favorite song. All she wanted was for people to not make a fuss over her. She didn't care what happened to her body and would have been mad to know we even had this memorial for her. That was who she was, a hardworking, no-nonsense minimalist who came here from the Colombian farmlands for the American dream. Grief isn't linear, and it doesn't follow a predictable path. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross introduced the 5 stages of grief, which many people are familiar with, but if you're not, you know, if you've listened to my podcast, I like to teach. So the first stage, remember, it's not linear, so you could be in and out of them at any time, is denial, the shock and disbelief that loss has happened. Anger, frustration, resentment, or questioning why this had to happen. Bargaining, the if only stage, where we wish we could change the past. Depression, the deep sadness and emotional weight of loss. Acceptance, acceptance, understanding that life will never be the same, but finding a way forward. David Kessler later introduced a sixth stage, finding meaning, which has resonated with me deeply. Finding meaning doesn't mean minimizing grief. It means using our loss as a catalyst for transformation, connection, and purpose. It's asking, how do I honor the human I lost through the way I live? Hence why I decided to record this episode. For me, finding meaning has looked like embracing my faith even more, helping others navigate grief, and being intentional about how I care for my body and mind. Grief is painful, but it doesn't have to leave us stuck. It can be a pathway to deeper healing and growth. Grief is not just sadness, it's an emotional roller coaster. It comes in waves, sometimes gentle, sometimes crashing down when you least expect it. So here's how I've been navigating my own grief for the last couple of weeks. Allowing the emotions to surface. I don't suppress my grief. My poor husband. I ride the waves, even if that means wailing and screaming in the middle of the night or laying down in the middle of the day to stare at the ceiling or even take a nap. And believe me, if you know me personally, I am not a napper. Journaling and reflection. Writing has given me a way to process my emotions and reflect on the lessons grief is teaching me. Therapy and support. Even as a therapist, I know I need guidance and a safe space to process this loss, and actually all my losses. Faith and scripture. I've been studying the book of Psalms ever since this all started happening. So let me see. I think I'm on Psalm 24 today, was studying the book of Psalm. And what's interesting is I use AI as well, where I ask for in-depth questions to journal. And I spend about 30 minutes with each psalm every day so far. It's really helpful and it just grounds me. Prioritizing my health. Yeah, I would love to just go, and I did for the first week of my grief. I didn't care. I just started eating whatever. But then I realized, oh my goodness, like if I eat all the sugar and processed foods and the chips and everything that I used to do back in the day, it's just going to lead me into a path that's going to make it worse. So I now am eating the whole foods again, forcing myself to go at least to walk a mile or two, grounding myself barefooted in the grass and taking care of my nervous system, which have been really crucial. Saying yes to my friends, even though I feel like saying no. So sometimes they ask me to do something and I'm in a sort of a brain fog, but I know the importance of community and to get out of bed and out of the house. So even if it's for an hour or two, I'll go, okay, I'll go. And what's beautiful is that I have some really great friends that understand what I'm going through. So that to me is so important, is that they're not expecting anything from me. They're just sitting there with me. And then accepting the complexities of my relationship with my mother. I can hold love and frustration at the same time, and that's okay. I can be angry that she wasn't able to love me the way I needed, and also highly respect her autonomy and resiliency. Seriously, this woman, now that I'm looking back, but I've always kind of respected that of her, that she was self-reliant, but to a fault at the same time. She was successful, but alone at times. So it's like getting the good parts, right? It's trying to find the good parts of those or what lessons they left behind to teach you, and then leaving the things that don't help you and learn from them and do not repeat them. So healing doesn't mean forgetting. It means finding meaning in the pain and using it to grow. So if you or someone you love is grieving, here are a few resources that can provide support and guidance. There's some books. There's one, Finding Meaning by David Kessler, The Grief Recovery Handbook by John W. James and Russell Friedman, Try Softer by Andy Kolber, and that's for trauma and emotional resilience. Then there's grief support groups like Grief Share. I have heard numerous wonderful, great things. I have sent quite a few clients to their local Grief Share groups, and I know personally one of my good friends who actually became a leader in Grief Share as well. And I think I might try it. I'm not sure, but I think they have online groups and local church counseling groups. So and then holistic mental wellness. Please, please, please prioritize whole foods, movement, trauma informed therapy, nervous system regulation, stress management. This is so important because you can go into a spiral. And I have seen, because remember, most people come to counseling because they're in a crisis, not for prevention, it's for intervention, kind of like what we do with westernized medicine anyway, right? Many of us go into doctors or hospitals like the experience I just went through with my mom, it was because of intervention instead of prevention. And there are ways to prevent things from happening, or at least to help you ride the waves of grief, because that's it. It's like surfing. You're surfing these waves because if you don't learn to surf them, you're going to drown. And I'm trying to help you not drown. Okay. So also therapy and faith-based counseling. So if you need guidance in providing and processing the grief or your CPTSD or healing, seek professional support. And when I say professional, a licensed therapist, please, someone that's licensed that understands a bunch of different modalities. You know, a holistic counselor that understands the mind, body, and spirit, whatever your faith is, because I'm sure you could find it whatever faith, because I know many people that listen to me are not just Christians. So, someone that understands the whole thing and doesn't just blame the devil or just blame science or whatever it is, like someone that understands that you're a whole unique biology, psychology, and theology. So, I would start with psychology today. And you could go in there and you could tick off whatever you want, your insurance, Christianity, what kind of counseling, where, online, and just read through them and see, trust your gut instinct of what you need, but go get help, please. And then there's a podcast that I want to talk about. It's called This Beautiful Ugly. Still here, now what? So this has insights on healing through faith and mental wellness about grief. So listen, I share my story not because my grief is more significant than anyone else's, but because in our shared experiences, we find connection, healing, and hope. If you're walking through loss, I want you to know you're not alone. There is light on the other side of the pain. Grief isn't just about loss. It's about transformation. It's about choosing to live with purpose, to heal with intention, and to create a legacy that aligns with who God has called us to be. Recording this episode is a way to release, reflect, and pour hope into those who need it most. My faith gives me hope, and that hope gives me love that has led me to a place of forgiveness, especially for my mommy and papi. Honoring them now means understanding that they too were unhealed humans doing the best they could with the resources they had. I have worked hard to take the good they left me as their legacy while breaking the unhealthy cycles so they do not continue with me. When I think about it, and I want to find the positive, because honestly, wherever your brain goes, your energy flows. I think Jim Quick said that. And it's true. And we get to choose. We get to choose on what we focus on. I could focus on all the pain and all the things I did not get, but I choose to focus on now and the beauty from the ashes. And what are we going to do? We are responsible for ourselves. And so we could stay stuck or we can choose to take that one step. So, on that note, as I sit here, an orphan, weird to say that, and even though I'm in my 50s, but it's true. My mom and my father are passed on to the other side. But I want to honor them this way, even though they might not have been the parental units I needed. and caused a lot of pain. I have forgiven them. And I carry my father's charisma and free spirit and my mother's work ethic and dedication. So thank you. Gracias por eso, mami and papi. Ooh. Well, guys, thanks for being here, for listening, and for walking this journey with me. Remember to always trust in the Lord, guard your heart, and renew your mind. Bye. And now for the disclaimer to make sure you understand that you are responsible for you. The content provided on the Holistic Counselor podcast is for entertainment and informational purposes only and is not intended as a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified mental health provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical or mental condition. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay seeking it because of something you have heard on this podcast. The views expressed on this podcast are my personal opinions and do not represent the views of any professional organizations with which I am affiliated. Call your doctor, 911, or 988 immediately if you have a medical emergency. The Holistic Counselor podcast does not recommend or endorse any specific tests, physicians, products, procedures, opinions, or other information that may be mentioned on the podcast. Reliance on any information provided by the Holistic Counselor podcast, guests appearing on the podcast at the invitation of the Holistic Counselor podcast, or other listeners to the podcast is solely at your own risk. Confidentiality notice. If you engage with the Holistic Counselor podcast by commenting or posting and are a client, please be aware that you may be revealing information that could compromise your confidentiality. Please remember that disclosing your identity or personal details can be linked to your clinical material. As a therapist, I am bound by confidentiality and will not respond to any disclosures of this type on this podcast. I am committed to upholding the ethics and confidentiality of the therapeutic relationship, which extends to all forms of communication in accordance with the laws and professional guidelines that govern mental health professionals. I want you to know that your privacy is of utmost importance, and you are responsible for protecting it when interacting on this platform or any other public forum. Thank you.